Welcome to Circle Back to Sunday here at Victory Hill. We are so excited that you're here to join us as we circle back and dive deep into the message from Sunday's sermon. You are going to get to meet some of our pastoral team on an intimate level, as well as other members here at Victory Hill as we circle back to Sunday's sermon. Welcome back to Circle Back to Sunday. We are here for a special episode with Pastor Brandon. We're bringing him back, and we are so glad to do this. This is going to be one of a kind of off the cuff. No sermon, but we are going to circle back to his sermon, which was a little bit ago. But this is just more of a conversation between pastors and those of us who, you know, we're on the congregation side. We're on that side. Well, she's married to one, so
that's true.
I'm just married to a good old country boy. You know, he loves Jesus and his Jeep, and that's where we're at.
As long as it's in that order.
Yeah.
I'm in there somewhere. I'm in there somewhere.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Jesus is first. But we're glad to be back for a special episode. But we do want to begin with a disclaimer. This is going to be an episode that we're going to have some hard conversations around, you know, trauma that could be physical, sexual, childhood, adult. We do want to have that disclaimer to give our listeners and our viewers an opportunity. If that is a sensitive subject for you, now's your time that you can opt out. We really are praying and hoping that if that is an area that is sensitive for you, that that's what this is for.
Yeah.
That it's a safe place, that this is why we're having this conversation, because churches too often don't address it, don't handle it correctly, and that causes a lot more hurt on top of trauma. So that's why we're here today, and we are so blessed that you took the time to come and join us. And Pastor Brandon has his own podcast that you can also tune into. That is?
Yeah, it's Made to Win. You can check that out there. And we're
Solid
actually relaunching a new podcast next month called Rooted. So, but check out Made to Win. That's specifically, there was 2 seasons there that really talk a lot about my journey and what we're talking about today.
Yeah,
So,
which has really kind of brought us here. And I grabbed you after that sermon, because I was like, listen, this needs to happen. We need to have this, because it's a hard conversation that I think people skirt around. They skirt around it a lot, and that can cause more hurt. So we're kind of having a panel conversation today. But I want, just after you were here and your sermon, do you care to give us a quick recap? So, because we're circling back, we're going back so that people can remember what you had talked about, because we did do a podcast, but I want to give you the opportunity to do like a Cliff Notes.
Yeah, probably tell us a little bit about you too, and your church. For those of you, you know, we've got a lot of new people that maybe not have been here and know who you are, and so kind of your connection to our
little
church.
Bio, little Cliff Notes.
Yeah, sure. Of course, my name is Brandon Petty, and I guess it was from 2003. I'm trying to think, 2005, I guess. Gosh.
Math is hard.
It's a long time.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Those
to
people
2010.
are over 21 now.
Yeah.
There's that. Okay.
Well, we're done today. We'll see you guys.
Not that she's calling anyone.
I was going to play nice. I just want you to know, I was going to play nice.
Listen, yes.
I was simply stating a fact. Don't come at me.
But anyways, I served for almost 6 years here as a student pastor. It was actually my first full-time ministry job. My wife and I were pretty young, newly married at the time, and then the Lord put it on our heart to start a church. And so we took almost 2 years to kind of plan, develop, get vision, build a team to start Generation Church in Portland, Tennessee, about a half hour or so, a little more from here.
Yeah, not far.
Great place.
Go check it out.
We celebrated 12 years as a church this past March.
Wow.
Awesome.
And so, but in that journey, going back to the sermon that I brought here, you know, I had gotten saved when I was 18 years old, and didn't grow up in church, but because of my living situation, my mother was in prison, and so I was kind of had no choice but to live with my aunt and uncle, and they took us to church. I tell people all the time that my aunt had a drug problem. She drug us to church every single Sunday. And
we support that type.
Yes, we do.
I'm grateful for that because, you know, at the time I hated it. I hated church. Didn't want anything.
Yeah.
I was a typical teenager,
Yeah.
you know, rebellious, all that kind of stuff. But, man, God used that to plant seeds in my life over about a 3-year period for me to give my heart and life to Him. Grew up in a ton of dysfunction. Everybody on both sides of my family is nothing but abuse, divorce, addiction, jail, prison. I mean, you name it. It's on both sides of my family. I didn't know my real father till I was 15. And so I'm trying to give you guys the Reader's Digest version. But what I talked about in my sermon.
Another thing about being older, Reader's Digest. Sorry.
I
know what that is.
Gosh. I'm trying to give you guys the TikTok 15.
version. All right, there we go.
See that?
Sending it
You're
down to that
acting like you're
generation.
young, and I will
true.
not stand here for
That
this.
is true.
I
You're
am
practically
young.
40. Sorry.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry, babyface. We're not old. Yeah.
40's the new 20.
That's right. Okay, thank you. Yes.
But I preached about Moses and his journey. You know, when you see his life, you know, everybody likes to talk about, you know, how God used Moses, but Moses had to do a lot of healing himself. When you think about the trauma surrounding his birth and surrounding how he grew up. And so the whole kind of like gist of the sermon was, you know, we can't fully experience freedom in Christ and experience our purpose in God until we truly heal from all of our inward wounds. And so growing up, I was sexually abused several times between the ages of 8 and 10. And so because of that trauma, it had a lot of different things that played out in my life. You know, I sought to find affirmation, and basically I found love, acceptance, worthiness through what I did in life. And so if I could be successful in what I did, if I could be the best at what I did, if I could be the hardest worker, the best youth pastor, the best all these things, I didn't see it at the time, but a lot of my identity was wrapped up in who I could be for other people. And it wasn't until 2015, and we can kind of go wherever with this story, but that was actually kind of just bringing it all together. That was the year that I actually ran into a volunteer in our church, and realizing that I didn't understand until that moment when I had this conversation with this guy on the front lawn of the church, that the guy that was serving in our church was the same guy that abused me when I was 8 years old. And so I tell people all the time that was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. At the time, it was very dark.
Which is hard for people to understand.
It's very hard to understand. But what it forced me to do was make a decision. I went through about a 6-month period where it's like, I've got to decide, am I going to let this thing destroy me from the inside out and continue to live in darkness? Or am I going to get help and bring a lot of this stuff to the light? Because like I said, I was married. My wife knew that my past was dysfunctional, but she didn't know a lot of hardcore details. And what I found was the thing that I thought was going to bring shame and the thing that I thought she was going to look at me differently actually brought us closer together, because she actually knew me and knew every detail about my childhood. And that just began about a 3 to 4 year journey of me really, really getting healthy. And I hope that's kind of like the point of the conversation today, is like, we want to talk about hard things, but really, man, my heart and my passion is to help people find freedom and
how to heal. Yes, same.
Absolutely.
That is exactly what I was hoping for as well. So just to kind of recap why I stopped, Pastor Brandon, is because as a child, I was also sexually assaulted. I was between the ages of 5 and 6, and it was a family member that we saw this person every day. And a lot of it, you know, you block out when you're that young. But unfortunately, like, I was the only one that told what was going on. And when I even told what was going on, didn't understand what I was telling them. You know, I remember seeing a commercial about starving people and them being abused. And I can vividly remember going from sitting on blue carpet in my parents' trailer to walking to my mom at the kitchen sink. And I looked at her and I said, I think I've been abused. Like, I didn't even understand really what had happened to me. And she said, what do you mean? Like, I can remember their comforter on their bed when her and my dad sat down to talk to me. I can remember that it was black posts, like a wooden bed that was black. Like, I can remember all those details, which is insane because I've blocked out a lot of the things that had happened to me. But come to find out, I wasn't the only one. And it wouldn't have stopped if something did not click in my head. And what's crazy is that we did go to church. My grandmother took us to church. My parents worked odd shifts, so my grandmother did a lot of the taking, and which we were all a close family. My mom was one of 10. You know, this was like a shock. This wasn't just a shock to like our small family unit. This was like a family shock, which unfortunately, the time that it was, therapy and all that stuff wasn't a thing. It kind of got swept under the rug. So I grew up with all of these things that I shouldn't have known. And I had nowhere to express that. I hid it a lot. And it was an elephant in the room.
Yeah.
We would still have to go to certain functions. Though my mom tried to protect us and like have us leave or whatever, there was times you couldn't prevent that.
Sure.
And, I grew up ahead of the curve compared to any of my teenage friends, so I sought worth because I thought that was the feeling that I had to have because I had it way too young.
Yeah.
And, even growing up in church, I hid it because I felt shame.
Yeah.
There was no voice for me.
Sure.
Right.
And so I treated that as this internal secret that only our family knew. It was only an elephant in the room if we were at a family function. But really and truly, it was causing me to seek out the unhealthiest relationships in my life. I dated my last 2 years of high school. I don't even remember. I dated someone who physically abused me, who convinced me when we graduated to move away, not tell my parents where I was going. And what's so funny is I tell people the worst pain was not the physical, like a hit or using sex against me. It was being dragged through our apartment by my ears. And a lot of people don't understand, that stuff stays with you and it comes from unhealed trauma.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not long after that, I jumped from one relationship to another. There was no time for healing, no time to even realize how much more trauma. I was kind of trauma collecting, and I had gotten out of church. I thought God was done with me. I was as far as I could get. And the boy's dad is not a terrible person. We were just really young. There was a lot on both sides. I didn't know how to treat him right because I'd never been treated right. I didn't, he didn't know how to treat me right, to the point that it was wrecking our marriage. I continued to live in this weird space. I was away from God. Our marriage was so hard. It was exhausting raising 2 kids and being in this marriage where it was never calm. And I was at my breaking point and I ended up crossing a line. And before we even got divorced, I had an affair. I've been very clear about my past. I'm not happy with myself to the point that I tried to kill myself twice because I'd been abused. I'd abused people because I saw that as I absolutely abused someone. I took that on as my full on shame. And I thought that me leaving was the best thing for everybody. And that is when I hit my knees. And I can remember being in my bedroom closet and praying, and God said, step out. And I thought that was all God wanted. I lost everything. Everything. I had friends leave me. I had nothing. And I started coming to church. I had a family member invite me here, and I remember sitting on the back row, feeling like, well, I didn't burn when I walked in today, And if it wasn't for Victory Hill and the small groups and those people who loved me when I word vomited everything, because I'm like, listen, I am completely and utterly messed up. I am a terrible sinner. I have done this and this and this. There's no hope for me. I thought God was done. And now, we have a blended family that we for the most part get along. I have 2 beautiful boys. They have a stepsister. And I have a church family who loves my boys, loves my kids. My kids are saved. They're baptized. And we have hard conversations. Out of all of that, I can say that all of the trauma in my life has brought me to a point where I have open conversations with my kids. They're aware of things I've been through. They're aware of the mistakes I've made. And I hope, my prayer is that God can use everything I went through, that their life is not like that. Now, does it prevent trauma from happening? Absolutely not.
Sure.
But it's the preparation that I hope that comes from every dark place I've been in my life to give them a place where they know they're always safe with me, they're always safe with God, and that they will never want to be where I was, to feel like that they're so bad that living isn't worth it. And I know that's a lot to unpack, but it's kind of like your story resonated with me so bad that you were so brave to stand on that stage and to share that. And there's so many people in the audience that I feel like, even that day I had cold chills, that there's somebody in that church that needed to know there's hope and that you can you can find strength in the bad things that have happened to you. You can find strength, like Amy Payne, in the bad things that you have done.
Yeah. I think too, so Gabe and I were in Pastor B's youth group. That's where we met. That's where our ministry life started. Gabe always gives mad props to B for setting him up for opportunity. He preached yesterday about how when he was here and just a young whippersnapper.
He is the baby in the room.
Some people wanted to, kind of run him off, but Brandon and Jess really saw the opportunity in Gabe and said, you can do it. And, took him under his wing and just kind of taught him.
He did so good.
I will say that, like, sitting under you for all of these years, and I have, regardless of spot, but even before Victory Hill for the last 5 years at Generation, one of the things that you push so hard is not just physical health, but mind, body, soul. And you teach a lot about soul health and how that trauma does not only interact with your mental health, but with your soul. And so I just think it's cool. And if you want to dive in on that, just, the journey that you've taken for that, because we started in 2018. So it was right after kind of that period of time, but I kind of watched you transform from just a physical health to then seeking counsel, to seeking accountability, to seeking elder advice in your life and letting people speak into you. But then also on a mental health journey, but also on a soul journey where you were seeking rest and you were seeking Sabbath and, just your family mission and things of those nature that, now we understand that generational is going into my kids. So putting forth effort into that. And so just hitting those three, mind, body, soul, because people don't understand that you can, seek counsel and be in therapy and your mental health take a better step forward, but your soul is still sitting.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny. I just did a staff lesson with our staff last Tuesday talking about the idea of the exchange life with Christ. I think, and it's funny because as you were talking about growing up in church, I think in the South especially, we probably experienced this as children. Church, people don't understand what it means to be spiritually dead.
Yeah.
I think when they come to Christ, we have not given people the full gospel. And I shared this in my sermon, how I lived for years. I was a Christian, but I had not experienced the abundant life Christ offers.
I can agree to that. Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is because when we introduce people to Jesus, it's like, okay, now either one of two thought processes begin to happen. One, either you're not going to struggle with the things you struggled with before, because now Jesus is going to take all that away and you're good. Or, the life is spent in legalism where it's, I'm trying really hard to perform in front of people, trying not to do bad things. Yes. We used to talk about the old student ministry theology of don't drink, don't cuss, don't chew, don't date girls who do. Yeah. That's kind of like,
nice. Put that on a t-shirt.
Every youth pastor's sermon when I was doing ministry early on was just all about don't have sex.
Don't do these things.
Don't do these things. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think what we failed to do was, introduce this idea of, spiritual death. It's not just I did bad things. Spiritual death is, we were in darkness mentally, emotionally, our wills.
Yeah.
And so when you come to Christ, when we talk about discipleship, a lot of discipleship is focused on behavioral modification. Yeah. The problem is we are only going to behave to the level of what we believe about ourselves.
Absolutely.
Right. And so if my mind and my emotions and my will are not being subjected to formation, whether that's through prayer, Bible study, counsel, surrounding myself with the right kind of mentors who are helping me, leading me into those places, that's where you get this. We had this, so-called mental health crisis, but what we don't understand is we've separated that from the spiritual realm. Mm-hmm. We've basically said, okay, well, that just means people have these physical abnormalities in their mind. And it's no, this is a spiritual issue too.
Yes.
Right. And so there's almost this idea of man, if we can just teach people how to do better things or do good things,
right,
but not really teach them how to go on a journey of having their thought process changed and transformed. Because think about it. Depending on when you came to Christ, you already have a particular way that you have formed thoughts, your desires, your will. God gave each and every single one of us God-given needs.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so what happens is when you come to Jesus, I still have these needs, right? And Jesus is just there to provide my eternity.
Yeah.
Right.
But he's not there to provide my needs.
Yeah.
And so you think about the basic needs God placed in you, love and acceptance.
Yeah.
Well, for you and I, that love and acceptance was only given to us in a, because you think as a child, as an 8-year-old child, you cannot mentally in a mature way wrap your mind around this is not okay.
Right.
But for me, growing up in the house I grew up in at 8 years old, it was normal to sit around and watch pornography.
Yeah.
It was normal for love to be manifested through sexual acts or behaviors.
Right.
And so that is a mindset.
Yeah. It only takes 90 days for your brain to form something.
So so coming to Christ at 18,
Yeah.
I had been formed for the last 10 to 12 years.
Which is a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot. Your thoughts, your desires. And so then you're only taught at a surface level, right?
Yeah. Right.
Right. Well, quit watching pornography.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just turn that off.
Yeah. Put the bottle down. You know,
Yeah.
Stop sleeping with your girlfriend.
Yeah.
And so what we have failed to see is like, how do we teach them to change the way their mind thoughts? You know, the encouraging word I always give to young men who are struggling with pornography, because I feel like this is the thing that people say. They say things like, you know, it's almost like, here's my struggle. It's like they confess the struggle, but then it's like, okay, I feel better. But there's never any like, hey, I want you to know, like, I know what it feels like to be in your shoes, but I also want you to know that it is absolutely possible for you to not watch pornography.
Yes.
Right.
And it's absolutely possible for you to be forgiven.
It is absolutely possible for freedom to be in your
Yes.
life. The problem is that we are not doing a good job of taking people through step 1, step 2. You know, we want them to be at the final stage really quickly.
But we're leaving them here.
We are leaving them here. And so it's like, if we can grasp our minds and understanding that a lot of what we are seeing out of Christians is idolatry. Because it's like, I'm coming to Jesus for my sin, but I'm not coming to Jesus to have my love and acceptance met.
Yep.
My desire for purpose
Yeah.
Right.
and affirmation in life. He created those needs in us so that it would draw us to him.
Yeah.
Right.
But what we do is we come to Jesus in order for him to give us the things that will meet the desires.
Yeah.
It just says he knows the desires of our hearts.
So put this in context, right? Put this in context. It's like, Jesus, I really want a husband, or Jesus, I really want a wife. Instead of, Jesus, I need you to teach me how to be fully loved in you so that I can love a future spouse.
Right.
Yes.
And so when the marriage doesn't work out, it's God's fault.
Right.
Right.
Or when I marry somebody who doesn't even follow Christ, or I start dating people who don't follow,
And that was
it's
part of
somehow-
my first marriage.
It's somehow, but do you see how like we basically use God to get the things that he's saying, you can only have that met through me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the person like for me that found affirmation and worthiness through success. And if you don't have that success, then man, something is wrong with you.
Yeah.
Or God doesn't have favor in your life, or you're not loved, or whatever it may be. And so then what we find ourselves doing is we are actually using the Creator to give us the creation to fulfill all of our needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is what I mean by like spiritual health is really getting people to understand their discipleship to Jesus is bigger than just, I need to quit doing a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's how do I continue to have my will, my thoughts, my emotions shaped and formed into the image of Christ. And here's the thing. It's not going to happen overnight.
No.
Sure.
It's years,
I'm years deep.
of discipleship. And it's a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of it. Is that it's an incredible
he
journey.
shows us more as we grow too.
Absolutely,
Like
yeah.
I feel like every time I encounter this person, because again, family, funerals and things happen, it's easier for me. And it's easier for me to hold my head high and know I'm above that.
Yeah.
That there's going to come a day, if he's not made peace with God about that, that's between him and Jesus. That and this is not a brag, but it wasn't just me. And unfortunately, I'm probably the most stable out of everybody. And I've still done some horrible things. And
chose horrible relationships and went through a lot, but it's like we got to remind people that there is freedom and forgiveness and repentance. And that it's, yes, that's not saying do the same things over and over again, but it's allowing them to have the tools and a safe place to grow and use that freedom. Like I have even said it on the podcast, you've heard me say it and you've heard me say it, that I am living a life that I used to look at and think it was so hard. I thought that's too much work. It's too much work to be Christ-like. It's too hard. I can't do that. I can't live up to that standard because my grandmother was that standard for me. And I'm like, I want to live her legacy, but I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can love this person like Jesus. I don't know if I can. But I've said it on the podcast before, like, I feel like I am so happy where I'm at in life. I'm content and fulfilled because I'm in a marriage that is Christ-centered. My children are believers. You know, they may one day look at me and say, I don't know if I want to go to church or not. And that is their journey, but I've given them the tools and prepared them to know where they're always supported and always loved and saved and have freedom in that. And it's a different kind of freedom, and it's so hard to explain.
Yeah.
I want somebody out there to hear that it's hard work. It's hard. It's owning who you are. It's owning the things that have happened to you. It's owning the things you've done wrong. It's not pretty. I don't like telling people the things I've done. It's not pretty, but there's so much freedom in the truth and vulnerability that will set you free.
Yeah. But like B was talking about with the discipleship too, though, like as far as like you know, you're asking for this from God, your needs that are happening, but you're not searching out the things that he's already put there. You're not mining your own gold that he's already deposited. It's what you feed. You know what I mean? It's what you feed yourself. Like Gabe was talking yesterday about, you know, feeding ox junk. They're not getting any stronger doing that. Right. And I cannot even remotely be I don't know, like Avail. I have no trauma like that. I have never walked through. And I used
do not
to
apologize
say,
for that.
I used to say I don't know how to talk to. There was a very brief moment in our lives where we were youth pastors. We were the worst, but we were very, very. I didn't look at you on purpose. No, I'm just kidding.
I was a bad one too.
Three people in this room have been youth pastors.
So there was a brief time of that or whatever, and but you know, you feed weekly on these things or whatever, and I would say that I always said I couldn't talk to young women because I didn't have a story to tell. Like there wasn't this moment in my past where something bad happened, or I had a great childhood, I had a great upbringing, but it doesn't mean that I didn't have my own things to walk through. Like, I mean, even what B was saying, like you do seek acceptance, you do seek success. And we all do. I did live by those black and white rules and don't cross the line, you know, those types of things, to where I had religion and not relationship. And so once, you know, I realized that those were my needs that I was coming to get fixed instead of God's already deposited that gold, let's mine it out. That was one of the things that we truly learned from your journey was soul health. Like I'm a good busybody. Like I'm a good and you have always said it, you got dreamers, you got doers. I'm a good part of the do part of the thing. Like give me a list of tasks, I got this.
She might squirrel a few times.
I'm not a dreamer, but I am a task oriented person. And you know, finding acceptance in checking off boxes for people or being who they need in that moment, or being a helper, you know, on the Enneagram, whatever there are negatives that come with it, instead of feeding myself the protein to make my spirit healthy and strong. So then I'm, you know, my soul health is mining out that gold that he's already deposited.
Yeah. And I'll just encourage you too. And this is for anybody listening, and I'm not speaking to your story specifically, but I do want to address something you said, because I think everybody has some sort of trauma. You know, I think we don't, most of us that don't have like the stories, like the crazy stories, define trauma differently.
Yeah.
You know, doing counseling with a lot of people, you know, we have them do trauma assessments, and it's fascinating. We just finished doing this with 40 different leaders. I took them through the book Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Pete Scazzero.
Yep, it's a good one, and they have it for women too.
We did 1 week where all it was a trauma assessment,
and
it was fascinating how many people, like, you know, now that I'm answering these questions, I have trauma. Because think about, I mean, if you've been raised from death to life,
Yeah.
that's trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
You know,
That's true.
That's true.
because I think most of us, even myself, like walking through what I walked through, I wouldn't have called it trauma until about halfway through my Christian life.
Yeah, you wouldn't
Sure.
know, yeah.
I just called it life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's what happened.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Right.
And because I think there's an innate thing within us, even when people would talk about my mother, talking about it would make me angry. It's like, why are you talking? Like, why are you
talk about
judging?
my mama.
But I had so much anger.
Towards her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's something in us that wants to protect that vision or that
Yep.
imagery of our family, that it's like, oh, I didn't have any trauma. But like, there's a reason why young girls who even grew up in church are still seeking out affirmation through relationships,
Very
or
true.
because it may have been small, but like that, I always tell people never compare trauma and
Yeah.
never say you don't have it, because I think there's something within us that what it does is it actually creates an obstacle for you to discover an even deeper level of gratitude and worship for God, to say like God, because I think that's also, and again, I'm not speaking to your situation specifically, but I know people that because they view their life as clean, what they forget is like, God didn't forgive you because you were good.
Yeah.
You know,
Or what you've done. Or
every single, like, I don't think my story is any worse or better than anybody else's, because at the end of the day, my story is the same as Mason's. My story is the same as Bethany's. I was once dead in my sin.
Yeah.
Now I'm alive in Christ.
Yeah.
And the problem is most people have not identified with that second one, is that now, like when you go into the courtroom,
Yeah.
he says, I don't
Forgiven.
need to hear any prosecution.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
Get out of my courtroom.
Yeah.
His faith is in Christ. He is not guilty. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Legal standing has
Come on,
changed.
man. Come on.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So I think, for pastors, we carry very much a different weight, because we're carrying kind of a weight of the church with us too. So healing process can look a little bit different because, they can say what they want. They don't want to see somebody fall off their horse.
Yeah.
So how, and I think what too, anytime you're dealing with kind of healing, it's a struggle. It takes time, like you said. And how do you do that in the context of you have a lot of things counting on you? And sometimes it can be a church, like for you, you were a pastor. I mean, you got to go through this healing journey leading a church you were mobile at the time, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So you're in this beginning growing of starting a church, but a lot of people, you have a life that's hanging in the balance, that you have a pressure of, I've still got to show up every day. So how did you kind of walk through your healing journey at the same time, carrying the weight of being a dad, a husband, and a pastor, and kind of the pressure of life that would keep you from kind of receiving the healing that you needed to?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would say, man, 100% my wife. Man, just, she's a gift from God to be like, hey, whatever you need to do, I'm right there with you, because she grew up similar to Bethany, where it's like, you look at their life, there's no major trauma. So this was even new territory for her. But I would say that's why it is important for every single person in ministry, not just lead pastors, but especially lead pastors, to have good, healthy, vulnerable, authentic community.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful that I did have that at the time. If I didn't have that, I'll be honest with you, I don't know that it would look the same as it does
Was
right
it
now.
within the church or outside?
Both.
Both.
But it was very small within the church, probably too small.
Yeah.
Like I've expanded that today in my life.
Right.
But it was actually a group of other pastors that I confessed a lot of this stuff to that helped me get direction.
Yeah.
And that's why I think no pastor should do life alone.
Yeah.
Don't be a lone ranger, because I feel like the attitude, it's funny, we just recorded an episode on our upcoming podcast about this, just talking about community.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Rooted, coming out in August. But like,
Subscribe.
Hashtag.
this was advice given to me
Yeah.
when I started the church. This is what they said: don't ever make friends with people inside the church, because they'll only hurt you. And I remember in that moment, like I already, like, the Holy Spirit was like prompting, like, man, reject that.
Yeah.
Jesus didn't follow that very well.
No, he did not.
He did not.
He did not. And I was like, I can't imagine. Like, for me, I get, this is what my kids say. This is like the Gen Z talk. I get the ick.
Yeah.
Whenever
Okay.
my
Right.
daughter's going to hate me for saying
Yeah,
that.
she is.
But like,
Did you say that?
I get frustrated when people say stuff like, you go to conferences and it's almost like we pad our egos and say things like, it's lonely at the top, you know? Well, and I'm like, come on, y'all. Like, we are no different than any other person out there trying to work 40, 60 hours a week, take care of a family. And I think that's why some people don't respect pastors, because we somehow elevate what we do as so far differently, and you know, we kind of throw pity parties for ourselves. And the reality is,
Nobody knows what I'm going through.
Nobody knows what I'm going through. And I think there is a level of just, and I think that's why so many pastor failures are happening too. Because not only do they not have accountability, but they don't have any kind of real, vulnerable, authentic community. And so I would say those two things in my life at the time were huge for me. But honestly, Mason, like, and this is not like a, you know, do step 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
I tell people, you're either going to humble yourself or you're going to be humiliated.
It's true.
Yeah.
Oh, fact.
And man, in that
You
season
can
of my
do
life,
it, or he can do it.
yeah, and in that season of my life, man, I just truly humbled myself. I allowed the humility and the shame that came with everything that was happening, and that was really, really.
And I've heard other stories like what you're talking about. They went through the, you know, and not like we all have things we've done in our past. We all have stories, and not addressing that in our life, trauma on your all's level, trauma on whoever's level, not dealing with some of those things can show up, and it's not excuses, but it's reasons for why we behave in the ways that we behave. And kind of what, you know, through your story, what I'm hearing, it's like you almost got to the moment where it could have humiliated you, but you had that moment of, okay, I need help.
Hey, I heard somebody say this. This was a quote, and it's so true. 'Cause I'm gonna tell you, I was at that place, and it's this: that a lot of times when you see pastors fail, it's because they were too prideful to quit, and so they actually sinned,
and they did it to get
get
out
them
of it,
to- it's
to
like,
get
well,
out of the pressure.
You kicked me out. I didn't have to quit.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is terrifying. But I'm telling you, I went through a 6-month period where I would daydream about any other job, something happening, like you're just making like, what could I do to get out of this? Because to go to somebody and say, you know what, I'm not mentally okay, I shouldn't be leading a church. That's humiliating.
Well, I think too, you know, like you said, in everyday life, I mean, it's not just pastors, like people that you've got a 40-hour week job, you've got to go back to tomorrow. Your kids don't eat. So like, how is, you know, what does healing look like in that context? Because like you said, we're not elevated as pastors. We're all following the same Jesus, walking the same path of discipleship. You know, we have to tell people about it on the way. We have to teach people how to do it at the same time. And so I think for people that, you know, when you're going through that struggle or pain or things you've got to deal with, that you know, what would, I guess, some advice that you would give to just the person that would refer to themselves as just, well, I'm just a normal person, I'm not a pastor, but I've still got all the stress of life. You know, how would you talk about fostering community and places for honest confession? Because I think one time, I can't remember who it was listening to, but they were talking about how you know, the Catholic Church has messed up a lot of their theology and a lot of different things. One thing they got right, it's probably in the wrong context, but it's confession. That we do confess to each other. That doesn't make everything better, but when I can confide and confess into somebody that cares for me, there's healing in that. And so, you know, what would you tell us for someone that, you know, just says, well, I'm just a normal person that's been through just, you know, they may be still calling it life, you know, community and finding those healthy relationships.
Do you care if I answer as a normal person?
Absolutely. I mean,
As a non-preacher person.
For us abnormal people.
For you weirdos over here.
I'm surrounded by weirdos. It's fine. Actually, I'm the one that
Don't call
likes,
me a weirdo.
Listen, I like raccoons and possums. I'm the weirdo in this group. It's fine. I accept it and I take it and I wear it with pride. Literally. But I want you to answer too. I just want to. I just wanted to ask permission. That was asking permission. I was trying to be polite.
Get to it.
So I would say community. I would resonate what you had said as a pastor, but it's not just community that's like, oh, it's going to be okay, you're going to be fine, or telling you you're always right. I think you need to be willing to have your tight community that is willing to tell you when you're wrong, that's willing to tell you the hard things in a loving way, not a degrading way, because we've all had that friend that's just been the not great friend, right? Not the one that's constantly beating you down. The friend that's like, hey, you're spiraling. Hey, you've been doing really well, but I know this happened, and it has sent you in a spiral, and I'm going to sit with you. What my best friend tells me every time, I'm going to sit with you in the dirt, in the dust. I'm going to sit with you until this gets better. Yeah. And it's not just a correction. It is letting me know, hey, you're veering, but I'm going to be with you. Yeah. You're not alone. I may not understand it, but I'm here. But it's being able to accept the truth about yourself, the hard truth in that community. So you can't have a community that's just a yes community. It can't be that way, or you're never going to grow or change. It has to be a community where you have that reciprocal relationship where you can be like, hey, you did great, but also, hey, this isn't going right. I love you, but let's correct it before it goes awry. And that's the you may be like, well, I'm losing friends. Listen, God's going to take those people out of your life that's not going to help you to serve him. So that's my perspective as a normal person is just to have those friends that are openly honest. But you go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to me, for some people, that might be like step 3 or 4, though, because I think
in our step process.
Well, the reason why I say that is because, especially for men listening, right now, the highest percentage of suicides is men between the ages of 18 and 35, and the number one reason is loneliness.
Yeah.
Kids go off to college and they don't know how to make friends because the public school system does not do a good job. Like, especially with men, and I'm just speaking from that because that's my experience. But
wait, you're a man?
Yeah.
But like a lot of, if you think about it, until you leave high school, that's the first time in your entire life you really get to choose your community.
Yep.
Because every other space you've been put into.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you grew up with school friends, it's because you had classes together. You played sports together. Proximity. And so for the first time in your life, that's not how you make friends. And so it may start with like, hey, I'm going to talk to a loved one, whether it's a spouse, somebody really close that I can talk to. Because like you said something earlier that I thought was really good, but it was just talking about how like, man, you were brave sitting up there and saying that. But I've also been having this conversation now for 6 years.
Yeah.
And so like it started with one conversation that led to another conversation that led to a bigger room conversation that led to a bigger. And so like if you can find one loved one, and then if you can find a counselor, and just the more reps you have to like get it out, what you'll find is that thing is not weighing you down anymore. And the more it gets out, the more freedom you experience. And then like I tell people, the reason why I'm able to tell the story the way I'm telling it differently even than I told it 6 years ago, because I'm telling it from a place of real freedom, not a place of like, I'm angry and I want people to know what happened to me. It's okay. Now I'm at the place where I've said it in so many rooms, and it wasn't even about like, you have to get to the place where you're not telling your story so that everybody in the room will identify and say something to make you feel better.
Right.
It's just, I don't care what you do with that information. Like,
and I can attest to that. I can totally attest to that because that's how I feel. Like like years ago, I would have panicked to have shared any part of my story on a podcast that's literally going to go out anywhere. But I mean, I own it. And I think the ownership gives you power.
It does.
And the more you do it, that power grows. And the more that you lean into a relationship, like you said, you were stuck in religion, not relationship. And I think that that's where people need to understand that bravery, that strength, and that freedom comes from a relationship with God. It's not about your religious rules, because those have been across history, across time. I mean, even Jesus dealt with religious rules, so it's that relationship with him that brings freedom. And, I mean, I didn't cry. And before, I mean, I'd be a hot mess, and I'm an ugly crier. So, like, I'm just going to throw that out there.
Is anybody a pretty crier?
I don't
Have you
know.
ever
I'd
wondered about
probably
that?
Anyway, I'm just kidding.
You look so incredible when you cry.
You're so pretty when you're sad.
Such a romantic thing to say.
Mason, go home and try that on Lauren when she
There you. Record her, please.
I like being married.
But But it is repetition. It really is. It was that bravery of me being able to share that in a small group, you know, then with my counselor. And even in counseling, when it's like they can't share that with other people, that's so intimidating, you know, because you already feel like this person's a professional. They're gonna judge me, even though that's not really their job, but you still feel that way. And then the more you talk about it, like I talked about it at a women's conference, and you know, I've been able to even up that and breaking it down for my children because they've reached an age where those are okay conversations to have.
Yeah.
That has brought more freedom. And it's just kind of like, as I go through this and talk about it more, I am to the point where like, well, people's going to take that and what they do with that's their business. That's between them and Jesus.
There's an incredible book called The Body Keeps the Score. And it just talks about how like our physical lives, basically you build up trauma and it comes out in your, I mean, it's what you see in war veterans and different things, and people who've been severe, because like when you read some of these stories, there's two books that were really instrumental in my journey. One was The Body Keeps the Score. The other one was The Wounded Heart. And you actually hear like firsthand stories. And, you know, and even looking at my story, I'm like, oh my gosh, that is absolutely horrific. And, the powerful thing about it is they said when they did all these studies, because the Body Keeps the Score is a very psychological book, but it talks about how, like, of course, people are trying to introduce all these different medicines and medications for men. And he said the biggest study that no one talks about and that they really kind of just ignored because it doesn't make money is like the people who found the best healing were people who were able to talk about in detail what happened to them. It's one thing to say like, hey, I was sexually abused. It's another thing to like walk through the story of every detail. And they said that actually people who were able to do that on a continual basis were ones who experienced relief from the symptoms of severe, you know, PTSD, trauma. And so, I'm with you on that. I think repetition, but I think it's just reminding our audience, like, you know, it's one thing to tell your story. It's another thing to really talk about it in a way that you understand that even if I was to tell 5 people today, because I tell people all the time, like there are days I wake up and I'm like, man, today, like I have zero bitterness, I have zero anger. And then I'm telling you, it's crazy how something will happen and all of a sudden you're right back to another feeling or another emotion. And you're almost frustrated with yourself. Why am I still feeling that? And man, Pastor Joel Delf, he's one of my mentors. He said something to me that was so powerful. He said, you realize, because I called him, like, man, I just had a trigger moment. I said, I don't know why this bothered me, but here's what happened. And he said, well, you know, triggers are actually blessings. He said, because they're a reminder that you don't live there full time anymore.
That's good.
And
I'm
write
like,
that down if y'all are taking notes.
All right.
you know,
You're right.
But you know, and it's almost like just a mini little flashback, but it's also like, if you look at it from the other standpoint, it's God reminding you like, you're not there anymore.
Ooh, that perspective shift is,
That's
good.
That's some good wisdom right there.
And that's what people need, is just a perspective shift. You know? So,
well, in this society too, like we want fast food nation, right? Like you want it fast, but even just the way you're telling your story now, it's not an age thing as far as like I've gotten to this number scale, but your story ages and your health has aged and you're walking it out. Has like even Moses, like he didn't stop when all that, like in his bad moments of whatever, but the story aged and God still used him, and he used him in this way and this way. And I think it's cool to, like you were saying, 6 years in or whatever, talking through it, and it's getting easier with like give yourself grace, I mean, it's like that with any physical part. Like I know several of us women have been talking about, like, all right, so I got my mile in today, I got my 2 miles in today, I went to the gym for the first time, or physical health, I'm just talking to my community currently, but you want it today, and that's really not
or I ate good for 2 days, but I haven't lost weight.
You got to keep going. You got to keep telling the story. Repetitiveness makes a difference. And I think that that's cool, because I think that a lot of people think that they, have to have it tomorrow, because I'm going to talk about it today. Healing comes tomorrow. Or that sounds great for when I'm in my 30s and I'm my life is gonna be set up better, or this or whatever. And I think that's really a transparent moment to say that you are still aging with it.
Well, maturity doesn't come with age; it comes with obedience.
Yeah,
and I think that's
write that down as well.
People, don't understand. You can be. I have experienced a lot of people who grew up in church, and they are not 40-year-old Christians. They're 1-year-old Christians, 40 years over.
Yeah,
and it's because of the lack of obedience in their life. You know what I mean? Like at some point,
you preaching facts right now.
I think like what you talked about at the beginning too. Sometimes when you say that sometimes the kind of the lean can be to put my faith in a decision that I made 40 years ago, instead of in the Savior that came to change me, transform me.
Yeah.
A God that wants to conform me into the image of His Son. That takes work. That's painful. That's us giving up who we are, and we put our faith in a decision, not in a process.
Yeah.
Because I've grew up in church. Everything, know. What do I need to work on? Well, there's a lot you need to work on.
Absolutely.
You need somebody to
Always.
write it down.
Yeah.
At different stages in life, there's things that you're going to work on. That's like my kids get mad at me. I'm like, this is the first time I'm doing this. Like, I've never had a almost 16, 15-year-old kid. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. You don't know what you're doing. We're all in this together.
It brings us full circle to the whole body, mind, spirit conversation, because a lot of modern Christians don't realize it, but they're actually believing in Gnosticism. They believe like it doesn't matter what I do physically, as long as I, somehow have some sort of spiritual connection with God, whatever. But God saved the whole person.
Yes.
And so we don't realize how all of them are tied together. If I'm not in a mentally good place, then that's going to affect how I treat my body. And if my body's not in a good place, that's going to affect my mood. If my mood's not in a good place, that's going to affect my mind. And it's going to affect my obedience. And so all these things tie together, and we don't realize, because there are people who are like, man, I just, I don't feel like reading my Bible. Well, I wouldn't either if I stayed up watching Netflix till 2 a.m. And I sleep, and I'm barely getting up in enough time to get to work, and I'm running and I'm stressed. People don't realize the whole life God is trying to transform. And if I don't address that from at the very center of who I am, what my desires are, where my identity is placed, if I don't start there, then everything else is just, you're basically trying to put a puzzle together, not, with the center in mind, or not with the picture. You don't have the picture. You're just over here putting pieces together.
Yeah. Everything's connected.
Yeah.
I like that.
I think the great thing, and we're about out of time. We're almost at an hour. So I think the great thing, just to hear from your story and your story, that that bad things do happen, but that there is healing available, and that it is a process, it is a journey, but you guys are two people that can say, hey, you can do that.
Yeah, you can do it.
It for anybody.
Well, and I just want to remind people too, again, Jesus didn't come, so that, I'm trying to say this in a way to make people understand. I think people think, man, my life is okay. My life is good. Therefore I don't need some sort of full transformation in Christ. Right. Our trauma it is not something that happened to us. It is the way of a wicked and sinful world.
Yeah.
And I think people forget about that. We are not in Eden yet.
Right.
And so what I want to also encourage people out there, that you have an incredible traumatic story. I'm talking about, I never want to belittle people, but I also want to remind people that does not give you an excuse to hurt other people.
Yes. Right.
And to be reminded, sometimes our worldview, if it's not put through the lens of the Bible, we will demonize people. Because if you don't believe in demons, then you're going to make people demons. And so I have to understand my story, not through look what happened to me. I have to understand it through the biblical story of this has been going on since Genesis 3. And if I can do that, then I realize this story is not even about my story. My story is a part of a much larger story. And it's a story of redemption, salvation, restoration, and that one day Eden will be fully intact again.
Yeah.
And so I just want to encourage listeners before we dismiss. I'd love to pray for people if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Because
we're pro prayer.
I mean, I guess that's fine.
I just want to remind people, man, God's promises, we live in the already but not yet.
Yeah.
If God has declared it, it will happen, but we're not fully there yet.
Yeah.
But man, we get to be a part of people's journeys
Mm-hmm.
toward that full
Yeah.
redemption.
Yep.
And that's what should excite us.
And that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because like I've led women's small groups and stuff that we have been able to help people who have gone through a lot of things. But it's nice to have another perspective, and not just another perspective, but a male's perspective who is in your role, things like that, so that people can see you're real. You know, you're real. Mason's real. Things have happened in Mason's life. Bethany's real. The people on stage, anywhere, that we're real people, and we're not perfect. Things have happened. Like you said, you're held to a whole different standard, but that there is room, like you said, for hope, for healing. But that's what part of our story is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like God knew before I was born all the things I was going to live through, but it was my choice to use it for his glory. And that is a choice. It's a choice that I could have sat in that, and I could have stayed sad, and I could have never helped anybody else. I could have never shared my story that someone out there needed to hear to help change their life, to find and follow Christ. But I daily choose Christ. I daily choose to live in my salvation, and I daily choose to grow with Christ. And this freedom that it brings is we're not lying about it. Like truly, I can't even, there's no words to express the freedom that has come into my life. And I know people think that's crazy. There's someone out there that's like, there's no way, there's no way I can feel that. I am telling you right now, if you are willing to hit your knees and surrender anything that you've got to surrender, God will provide.
Absolutely.
He will provide. So
Well, let me pray for us.
Yeah.
Jesus, thank you so much for this opportunity to just hopefully talk about some conversations that will resonate with people who may listen to this. And I just pray that wherever they're at, where they're listening to this, whether they're in the gym, they're in their car, maybe they just have an opportunity to stop what they're doing, pull over, stop into a gas station, get off the treadmill, and so many different illustrations for that. But and just take a minute to seek your face and to confess anything in their heart, God, that they are just holding on to. Maybe it's bitterness or unforgiveness, people who have hurt them, whatever they've walked through. And God, I pray that they would begin their journey, a lifelong journey towards healing and hope and restoration. And I pray that you would use this episode and our words today to bring you glory and honor and to bring other people to full salvation. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, again, thank you, Pastor Brandon, for taking your time to come and physically be with us today. I was super stoked when Bethany was like, he's coming. I was like, yes. So that we appreciate your time. I know it's very valuable. And thank you guys for always being a part of the podcast and believing in that we're just expanding to help people find and follow.
Season 2 coming August 12th.
Let's watch it.
Get ready.
Watch out.
Small
my
groups
thunder.
start
I
back
might
in
be
August.
nice to Mason. Who knows? You need to tune in and make sure.
Don't hold your breath to that.
She's still being transformed.
I'm
too.
Yes.
still finding Jesus.
But yes, we are excited about season 2. Definitely check out Rooted with Pastor Brandon, because we it's not just about Victory Hill. It's not it's not just about one church. It's about the church.
Yeah.
So we are so glad to partner with you. We hope that we can maybe do that again in the future.
And we're talking about finding community today, and small groups are about to open back up. And you need to get in community, find your people, find a group that's going to give you life.
Yep. So here soon, we're going to keep circling back. So we hope to see you guys then and enjoy the rest of the break, and we'll see you soon.
See ya.